Welcome to the Magnify Your Miracles podcast. Get ready to be inspired, uplifted, and connected to the miraculous energy of unconditional love that I call Mother Mary. If you're a highly sensitive, highly creative entrepreneur or light worker, and you want to magnify your impact and your intuition, you are in the right place. I'm your host, Reverend Frances Faden, interfaith minister, intuitive coach, and author of Meditation is Friendship with God. I can't wait to share miraculous stories, books, meditations, messages, and interviews with other miraculous light workers just like you. Are you ready to magnify your miracles? What are we waiting for? Let's get started. Hello, my miraculous friend, and welcome to another episode of the Magnify Your Miracles podcast. This is Reverend Frances Faden, and I'm so grateful that we get to spend this time together. We're going to be talking about an amazing book, a really fascinating book that I'm excited to share with you. And I'm even more excited to share with you that next week, the author, Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, is going to be the guest that we're talking to. So we're really going to dive in. But before we get to any of this amazing stuff, let's take a few deep breaths together just to get ourselves grounded and centered. Breathing in the energy of expansion, breathing out anything that you no longer need. Just give yourself permission to be here 100%, no matter what you're doing. Obviously, if you're driving a car, keep your eyes open, but you can still bring your awareness to your breath. And just let yourself start to feel that divine presence right now, supporting you, loving you, encouraging you. And let your mind settle down to be able to receive this inspiration today, inspiration that is designed to help you magnify your miracles. And knowing that you're going to be hearing whatever it is that you need to hear today, let's take one more deep breath together in gratitude, and we can begin. All right, my friend. Well, welcome back. I'm really delighted to be able to share this book with you. So you might be thinking, whole brain living, what is Reverend Frances talking about? And what I'm going to tell you is that the interview you're going to hear in next week's episode was really amazing and mind-blowing. And in my opinion, Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor is a walking, talking, living, breathing miracle herself. And what is so cool about this book is that she has scientifically proven what I've been telling you. What do I always say at the end of my podcast? The key to magnifying your miracles is to remember that your miracle is already here. It's already here because it's always present here for you. She's proven it, and she's proven it through living it. And so if you don't know who she is, back in 2008, she gave a TED Talk. It was one of the first TED Talks. People didn't really even know what a TED Talk was. And her first book is called My Stroke of Insight, where she experienced a profound stroke and lost basically the use of half of her brain. And so she had been previously a left brain kind of person, getting a lot of stuff done. And she was left with only her right brain. And while she was really happy, she experienced deep states of bliss. She lost language and a lot of different things. So I'm going to read you a little bit of her story from the preface. But what I can tell you is since she did that TED Talk, she's gone through a lot of her own process. And really her passion is the brain. And so if you're at all like me, I'm a very logical person, even though you wouldn't think so based on the fact that I talk about miracles all day long. I'm very logical. I'm a Gemini. I'm very intellectually oriented. And so to be able to have what I believe explained scientifically, for me, just lit me up, and it's really fascinating. So you're gonna really love her. So I'm just gonna read a little bit from the preface, and then I'm gonna take you through a couple of the key points in this book. And then if it resonates with you, I highly encourage you to go ahead and get this book. And then also definitely tune in next week when we get to chat with Dr. Jill, because she's amazing. And we had some fun talking about the 4 parts of the brain. So here's what I'm going to read to you. Now, I'm reading from the ebook version of it, so I don't know if my page numbers are going to agree with your page numbers, but this is in the preface. So she says, in 2008, I received an invitation to give a TED Talk. At that point in time, there were only 6 TED Talks online, and I had no idea what TED was. The TED Talk, my stroke of insight that I gave in Monterey, California, was the first to ever go viral on the internet. As a result, TED and I became globally famous simultaneously. In that TED Talk, I shared with the audience my story of surviving a massive cerebral hemorrhage in which the left hemisphere of my brain shut down and the right hemisphere became dominant. I described how, through the eyes of a neuroscientist, watched with fascination as my circuits and faculties went offline. I took the audience on a journey into the deterioration of my own left brain, whereby I shifted into a state of peaceful euphoria and oneness with the universe, unlike anything I had ever known before. Now I'm going to stop right there and say, in the show notes, I'm going to put a link to her TED Talk from 2008 so you can see it. It's fascinating. I remember watching it back then. And she'll talk and tell you exactly what happened. She said, within 3 months of delivering the talk, I was chosen as one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. I became a premier guest on Oprah's Soul Series webcast, and her memoir, My Stroke of Insight, A Brain Scientist's Personal Journey, was published by Penguin Books, spent 63 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, and even today, over 12 years later, it remains the #1 book in the Amazon marketplace on the subject of stroke. The 18-minute presentation instantly changed my world, and many other lives were permanently shifted too. I still have TEDsters come up to me and share what row they were sitting in on that fateful afternoon, and over 25 million views later, that talk remains one of the most popular TED Talks of all time. Unquestionably, in many ways, that TED Talk was an amazing success, but in my heart, the talk failed to accomplish one thing I had hoped it would do. I wanted us as human beings to recognize that we are connected as part of a whole, and I wished for us to treat one another with a higher degree of respect and kindness. Instead, our civility toward one another has clearly decayed over the past decade and more. Perhaps this is not so surprising, given that we live in a world where our politics, relationships, and life in general are spiraling into an uncomfortable state of chaos. Life is tough with its highs and lows, and none of us came into the world with a manual for how to get it all right. But what I have learned is that we do have the power to pause, sidestep our habituated patterns, and make better choices. We have the power to choose moment by moment who and how we want to be in the world. That ability, like every ability we have, is dependent on the cells in our brains that perform that function. Our brain is a magnificent tool that is the home of our thoughts, emotions, experience, and behaviors. When we understand at a cellular level what is going on in the relationship between our thoughts and emotions, we no longer have to be bound by our emotional reactivity. Instead, we can become emboldened to live our best lives and our best selves. We have much more power over what is going inside of our heads than we have ever been taught. Then she goes on to say, much of the material in this book stems from my own experience with watching my brain break down due to trauma, and then insights I gained as the cells in my brain recovered. In the big picture, this book is about our shared journey into the challenges of our lives and what our choices are and how we can live our best life while taking our brain anatomy into account. In these pages, you will encounter a new paradigm for understanding how the different parts of our brain work together to manifest our perception of reality, along with a set of tangible tools you can use to not only master your brain's emotional reactivity, but ultimately live a whole brain life. You are the life force power in the universe, and your human brain is amazing, far beyond your wildest imagination. This book will clarify for you exactly what that means and what your options are as you learn to own your power and apply these tools to create the life you want to live. This book is your roadmap to peace, which is really just a thought away, which I love that she says that peace is just a thought away. So as you can see that her stroke opened the door, but then she goes really deep into these 4 aspects of your brain and how they really are like inner characters for you. Now, one of the things I love about this is in the month of July, which is when I'm recording this, July 2021, Mother Mary has said that practicing making decisions, practicing choosing was a superpower, and it would really help us this month to feel our own power. Even if we're doing the same thing every day, we're waking up, we're having a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, whatever it might be. If you're consciously choosing to do that, you'll start to feel the power of choice within you, and your life isn't going to feel quite so stuck and just automatic pilot anymore. So I love that this is the book we're talking about, because I didn't know Mother Mary was going to give us that guidance until last week. And here we are with a book that will help you do exactly that. So even if you're not a sciencey person, I think you're going to really love this, because Dr. Jill talks about things in a very relatable way and in a way that you can really understand. And so she started to recognize, as these parts of her brain started to come back online, that there were these 4 parts. And so let me see if I can find where she has the 4 descriptions. So you have the left thinking brain, the left feeling brain, the right feeling brain, and the right thinking brain. And this might be a little bit more science than what you want to know, but if you're interested like me, I'm very much as above, so below. So whenever science starts to reflect what I know to be true on a spiritual level, I get really excited about it. And these 4 parts of you, which again, you're going to learn a lot about this next week when we have her as a guest, they serve different functions. And we all tend to be, we can be very left brain thinking oriented. This is the part of us that makes lists, want to get stuff done, very doing oriented. Your left brain emotional part of you is where all your memories, emotional memories are. If anybody ever broke up with you, if anybody ever hurt your feelings, anything like that, this is the part, in my understanding, that is the most reactive and is a little bit like addictions can be here. And this is the part of the brain that I feel like can kind of get us in a little bit of trouble. Very much focuses on what's happened in the past. And then we have the emotional part of the right brain. And this is the part that is just very blissful and happy-go-lucky, although it can get into a little bit of trouble because it wants to just have a lot of fun and might not think about the consequences. But then you have your right thinking brain. And your right thinking brain, in my opinion, based on what she has said, is the divine part of you. Now, I always talk about this and I'll say, we have our body, we have our mind, and then we have our higher self. This actually shows us where your higher self kind of operates in your brain. That right thinking brain is the part of you that's going to make the higher choice. It's where compassion can occur. It's the part of you that can see, a little bit more of the big picture. And what Dr. Jill recommends that you do is that you name these 4 characters. You name these 4 characters. So again, next week you'll hear about the names that she came up with and the names that I came up with. But I encourage you to do that, to really come up with these 4 parts, because when you recognize that, oh, that's that part of me, like for example, she has named her left emotional brain, which she calls that character number 2. She calls that part Abby, and that stands for abandonment, because she feels like a lot of her struggles that she's had just come from the process of abandonment that all of us go through at one point or another, and it brings up a lot of that stuff. So when she starts to have those feelings, she's like, oh, Abby just came online, and it helps her to be a little bit more detached from it. And I have to say, after I did the interview with her and I was reading this book, I had a similar experience where I was able to detach from my own emotional reaction to something, because, I'm highly sensitive. I'm highly sensitive. I'm highly creative. I can get my feelings hurt at the drop of a pin. I can also read people's energy from around the world. So there's definitely positive things about being highly sensitive, but I can also really get my feelings hurt. And what I started to see was like, oh, that was just character number 2, reminding me of all the other times that my feelings have gotten hurt. And I was able to step aside and go, okay, well, it does hurt. What can I do to take care of myself? And that question is activating character number 4, which is the right brain thinking part of you. So once you see that there are these 4 characters inside of you, you don't have to be a victim to them. And so if you get anything from this podcast and anything from this book, I hope that you get that you're not a victim to your emotions, and you're not a victim to what might be going on in your brain. She even goes on to talk about how these 4 characters in your life will help you in relationships. Let me see if I can find where this page is. It's a little bit more of a challenge for me to read this one. It's an ebook and not a book. I'm very much a book kind of girl. Yeah. So part 2. So in part 1, she's going through all of the parts of your brain and her story. And then in part 2, she's talking about the 4 characters that I just talked about: left brain thinking, left brain emotional, right brain thinking, how to get them all together through something called a brain huddle. And we'll talk about that next week as well. But then she talks about the 4 characters and your relationship with your body, romantic relationships, addiction and recovery, and even the influence of technology. So it's more than I can go through today necessarily. And I have to say, as somebody who is a fan of Mother Mary always shows up for me with the number 4. I see her in 4, 44, 444. I always think of that. And so the fact that this brain energy is in 4 characters or 4 quadrants made me smile and say, oh, Mother Mary, you're definitely guiding me with this and wanting me to show people that they can help themselves. So I really encourage you, my friends, if you're of the mind where you want to get a little bit of science behind understanding yourself, if you're somebody that has struggled with emotional problems meaning like your emotions can take you down. Let me put it that way. Like for me, sometimes what would happen is I would get discouraged or get disappointed, and I would say I would lose my mojo. It's like I would lose my motivation, I'd lose my energy. Like if you've had those kinds of things happening, you might want to take a look at this book and see if you can work with yourself and help yourself get a little objectivity and recognize that even while you might be having your feelings hurt, there is still a part of you that is present, that is divine and is aware and can have compassion and higher thinking. You know, and this isn't about pretending that you're not having your feeling. This is really about stepping back and saying, wait a minute, okay, so this part of me is now driving the car. How can I get somebody else in that driver's seat? Let me take care of the part of me that's suffering, but let me not let her drive me over the cliff, which often happens when we're emotionally distraught. So as a highly sensitive person, I think that you're really going to enjoy this book. And I'd love to hear about your thoughts about it and what you've noticed working with yourself. Dr. Jill is really amazing and very compassionate, and I'm excited to share the interview with you next week, where she's going to be diving into all of this and really explaining it. And like I said, this gives us the evidence that your miracle is already here, that part of you that is enlightened is already here, that part of you that is divine is already here, that the peace that you're seeking is already here. What a blessing, right? All right, my beautiful friends. So I'm going to leave that with you. I'll put all the links to things in the show notes if you want to check out the book and check out Dr. Jill's info and her TED Talk. I'll see if I can find that for you as well so you can watch that. And in the meantime, remember to tune in next week. If you did enjoy this episode and you do enjoy this podcast, it would help me so much if you left a review wherever you get your podcast, whether that's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or wherever it might be. And if you want to leave me a comment, that would be awesome as well. Remember, my friend, that the key to magnifying your miracles is to know that your miracle is already here. That's the key to the whole thing. God bless you, my friends, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Magnify Your Miracles podcast. I'm so grateful to be able to spend this time with you. If you want even more inspiration, feel free to visit my website, francisfaden.com or magnifyyourmiracles.com. And if you did enjoy this episode, I would really appreciate it if you left a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever it is that you connect with awesome podcasts. Remember, the key to magnifying your miracles is remembering that your miracle is already here.